I wanted to get away from people just say, well, faith-based, that's just kind of like its own thing. But for me, it was about like saying, well, I mean, people's faith is so important to who they are and their very essence, their existence. And so I didn't feel like that had to be its own genre. I feel you can marry that with anything. You can marry it with sci-fi, as I previously did. You can marry it with fantasy. It's no film and no genre, can be without, an element of faith in there. So that was always my goal with my past few scripts, and that was certainly my goal with Exemplum, to make this really fascinating faith-based film, but also this really intriguing noir thriller at the same time.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Vince Salerno podcast. This is episode 74. It's a big one because we have a very special guest on today's episode. It is filmmaker Paul Roland. If you don't know Paul Roland, he just released last year now the independent feature film Exemplum. Exemplum centers on a Catholic priest who has a fall from grace after his successful internet show is canceled by the diocese and his parish. He channels a lot of resentment and goes down a path of dark proportions as he tries to blackmail his parish into giving him his show back, which ultimately leads to just things spiraling out of control for him and him having to face the consequences of his actions without giving too much away. I've seen the film. It's phenomenal. One of the best films of last year. One of the best original independent films in a long time. I also had the pleasure of reviewing the film for theblaze.com. The review for that, the link to that review will be in the description of this episode. So if you want to read that, go ahead and check it out. Paul is a really great guy, really great filmmaker. I had a great time picking his brain about his process, what inspires him, what drives him, the types of stories he likes to tell, the things that have inspired his unique style of storytelling. All of that's on display in this interview. And again, if you have not seen Exemplum, check it out. It's available for free on Tubi TV. There are other places where you can purchase the film, either as a rental or as a digital copy. Highly recommend you do that because that is one of the best ways to support Paul and his future filmmaking efforts. So without further ado, guys, enjoy my interview with filmmaker Paul Roland. All right. Paul, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's an honor to have you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Vince. It's an honor to be here.
Awesome. So you are the writer, director, and actor of the independent film Exemplum. For those who may not have seen the film, do you want to tell them what it's about?
Sure, absolutely. Exemplum is about a Catholic priest. Out of paranoia, he starts recording his confessions, and then he becomes obsessed with those confessions and starts playing them back. And in the process, he gets this idea to create his own internet show called Exemplum. And an exemplum is, if you don't know, they are morality tales. They're primarily in the Middle Ages, used by writers, typically would tell a story about people and their foibles and how it leads to some downfall. There's Geoffrey Chaucer dabbled in it in his piece, The Pardoner's Tale. So he gets this idea for this internet show called Exemplum, and he uses the sins of his parishioners that he's recorded as a base of inspiration for this. And the show becomes very big online. He gets a Twitter following, a YouTube following. He's popular. And then through bureaucracy and corruption in the church, all that gets wiped out. His show is canceled. His social media presence is silenced. And he becomes embittered about where he has gone with his life. He's doubting his vocation as a priest. and he decides to take one of those recordings and blackmail a wealthy parishioner with it. In the process, he gets linked up with a hacker, and it becomes this cat and mouse game that spirals out of control from there.
I've seen the film, of course, and I've actually had the pleasure of reviewing it for theblaze.com. As a Catholic, I enjoyed it. It's definitely added to my enjoyment of the film, but your use of combining such unique elements such as social media and social media fame and this influencer world that we live in, um, within a Catholic lens, and addressing sin in such a unique way that I think some more Christian conservative filmmakers are either afraid or unwilling to delve into. It's really a masterstroke and really testament to your talents in front of and behind the camera. So I just got to applaud you for that. It's a great film, and for those watching, if you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. It's available right now on Tubi, right?
That's right. It's available on Tubi for free as well as on YouTube for free. But I would highly recommend to people, if they can, to spend either the $1.99 at Vimeo or on Google Play to watch the movie completely without ad breaks, and it's a high quality stream. The movie is meant to see without ads. So if you can do that, do that. If not, then watch it free on Tubi.
Is there any plans to potentially put the film out on physical media? I'm a huge physical media guy, so I know I would love to add that to my collection.
Well, I would certainly love to do that, and thank you so much for being such a fan of the film. It means
Of course.
a great deal to me to hear you say that. I would love to bring it to physical media at this point. I mean, when it comes to that, there's a high, high amount of overhead to release a film out on DVD. As of right now, my distributor has no plans to do that. They would, I think, if the movie was clearly showing that there was a large enough fan base for it, which I do believe will materialize eventually. Just at this point in time, it's online, and then I would love to have a Blu-ray release. Probably, we'll wait for the 10-year anniversary of the film. I think that's when we'll get our physical media finally.
That sounds good. I'll be there day one. Okay, so you've gone on record about the story of the making of this film, which is a pretty incredible story. You had to deal with a lot of difficulties during COVID. Your wife was pregnant at the time.
Oh
You
yeah.
guys had you guys' house had flooded at the time, and equipment was sprung all over the place. I do want to talk about the inspiration behind the story specifically.
Sure.
Where did this
Yes.
story come from?
Well, I mean that is kind of a complicated story. I'm not going to do the whole Vladimir Putin history lesson here, but I will. But I will take you back. When I was in high school, that's when I started getting involved in filmmaking. I was very fortunate. I had went to Chippewa Hills High School in Orange County, and I had a wonderful teacher, Mr. Sotner, who taught drama the first 2 years, and then you could go into either advanced film production or you go into advanced stage production. And I went into advanced film production in my junior year, and it was a very unique film class. We were taught Ingmar Bergman, Fritz Lang, German Expressionism, French New Wave, everything about cinema. I'm at 15 years old watching these movies, so it changed my outlook on the art forever. And since then, I had been pursuing filmmaking and been pursuing film screenwriting. That's where I wrote my first scripts. That's where I made my first short film. And so, flash forward into the future. After I graduate college, I'm pursuing writing full time. I take a break for a little while. I fire up the engines again in 2015. I write about a total of 7 scripts. And, as people know, this industry is very hard to get anything off the ground. So when it came time for 2019, I had written a short film that I had planned to make for about like $5,000-$6,000. And in the process of raising the money for that, I was like, well, why don't I just make a feature film? I admired people like Christopher Nolan and Robert Rodriguez and Darren Aronofsky and Kevin Smith for so many years, all these 90s independent filmmakers who got their careers started with nothing. And I just was, why don't I just do that since I admire them so much? So that's when I committed to the idea. I got the money in the account 2 weeks before COVID hit, which was wild. And then I started writing the script. Now, in terms of the idea for the film, that's a multi-pronged question because it's there's a lot to it. I had written a script prior to Exemplum called The Syncretist, and it was a lot of it similar themes and concepts that are in that film you found in Exemplum. So Exemplum was kind of a distilled version of that. There's a lot about spying on people, a lot about taking people's secrets and using them as weapons against another person, a lot about the quagmires people get into in the pursuit of something they think is noble and just. So I was fascinated by those concepts, and I wanted to reuse them again. So I had in my mind, just in the back of my mind, I don't know what, it was just weird, the idea of a priest that was recording his confessions. I didn't know where that would take me. I had no idea. But I had that in my mind. I was very intrigued by that for a lot of reasons. It's fascinating, the idea of a priest recording confessions, the idea of taking people's sins that they're laying out there and freezing them in time like that, and the power and the disaster that can come from that. So it was from there that he's recording his confessions. Then I got the idea of Exemplum after doing some research about that and utilizing it for his online social media following, etc., etc. Now, keep in mind, as I'm doing this, as I'm creating this whole story, I have to pair it with the fact that I'm only making this thing for about $6,000, $9,000. My initial budget was going to be $6,000. I was able to raise another 9.5. I was able to raise another 3.5 for the film once we hit production. But I have to think about every single story idea I have. I must be able to accomplish this with that amount of money. So there's no artistic freedom. So I have to be very conscious about where is this taking place? What is happening? Can I practically do that? Nope. I have to think of something else. So there's a whole lot of that coming into how I'm writing this script and creating this concept. The reason why I think Exemplum does work, and I think it connects with people, and it is intriguing, is because I did write that script beforehand. So I knew kind of the emotional beats that I wanted to hit when I got to Exemplum. And it was just a matter of how do I distill that down so I'm getting kind of at the essence, so it's like, it can be small like that, but I can still kind of have that emotional punch. That was the real challenge for me. And also, I think putting it into the film noir concept really helped it as well. Because film noir, you can do it at a low budget. And film noir was a perfect genre, I think, to marry the spiritual aspect to the thriller aspect. Because film noir, I think, when you really look at it, film noir are basically morality tales, really. It's always about someone cheating someone to get somewhere, or people's dark impulses leading them to their downfall. So I just felt it was a rich genre to mix with the faith-based.
Do you have a particular attraction to film noir specifically?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say of the two genres that American cinema has created, film noir and Western, I'm more attracted to film noir, primarily because of what I just said about the morality tale concept. Film noir is more about, this is how you get it wrong, this is how you screw up. It's about, it's tragedies in a way. Whereas, Shakespeare explored a lot of that. And Western, to me, is more about how you get it right, about how awesome you are. And I'm not really fascinated with that. I'm fascinated about how the Western evolved as a genre throughout cinema, how it influenced people like Akira Kurosawa, and then influenced filmmakers back here. You got spaghetti westerns. Western is a fascinating genre in and of itself for that. I mean, even Quentin Tarantino was so moved by that, he made a whole film. You know, the Kill Bill franchise is basically one giant reflection about the Western in cinema.
Mm.
Um, so, but for me, I wasn't drawn to the Western. I never have been because I feel like, in terms of like the of the ethos it creates, is kind of this almost like Pharisaicalism. That's probably why Tolkien himself, you know, when he was writing Lord of the Rings, what he would reflect upon the past epics, he felt himself a little bit like drawn away from that because it kind of leads people to this idea, well, I'm a hero, I'm this, you know, I can be great kind of thing. And this is why, you know, Frodo is not the one who throws the ring into Mount Doom at the end. And so I was more fascinated by like, what is it, you know, that human beings, that drives them to, their impulses that drive them to downfall, their impulses that drive them to greed or
Mm.
corruption. And the film noir has always been about that. That's why I think it's a more powerful force in cinema.
Gotcha. You're talking to a diehard Western fan, so I do.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
I grew up
I
on.
want to be clear. I do not dislike the Western. I
Oh
love the
no,
Western,
I didn't
and
think that's what you were
I
implying
love,
at all. At
and I
all.
especially love the Western when it marries itself with film noir. That's
Sure,
what
sure.
screenwriter Tyler Sheridan certainly did with a movie like Wind River. And you know
Hmm.
they've been, you know, sort of in some way influencing each other throughout cinema. I mean, Batman is both film noir and Western, which is
Right.
you know fascinating thing. But I'm just talking about the Western itself, distilled like at its very essence, at its very beginning, doesn't fascinate me as much as film noir does.
Yeah. No, no. I think you make up you make some very good points. I think the Western. Yeah, like when you think about like the John Wayne era, it's a very I don't want to say fantasized, but it's a very, yeah, like hero-esque, like, you know, we all can see ourselves in you know, the John Wayne character
Yeah,
because we all want to be John Wayne. There's a John Wayne in all of us. But on the opposite side, with like something like film noir, there is a darker side to all of us. I think it's very interesting that you see that westerns is the pursuit of the good in us, and noir is the pursuit of the bad in us. And I think it's a very interesting analysis on that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
As a Catholic, I think the idea of a just following the story of a priest recording I mean, you could have stopped right there, recording his confessions. I think that's endlessly fascinating because I think, as you and I both know, like if a priest were to do that in real life, that's like an excommunicable offense in the Catholic Church.
Absolutely.
Um, what made you want to specifically tackle um, this from a Catholic lens?
Um. Well, you know, I Catholicism, I would say, is my muse, even if the movie I'm writing or making isn't specifically Catholic in, you know, you know, outwardly. The values expressed in there, the morals expressed in there are going to be from my Catholic perspective. Even if it's something as simple as feeling guilty about something that you've done and, you know, coming to grips with that, uh, I would say. So that's always going to be in there. You know, I had written several scripts prior to this. Every single one was trying to integrate my Catholic outlook, very outwardly Catholic outlook, and marry it with genres. I really wanted to do that, do something special in that regard. I wanted to get away from you know, people just say, well, faith based, you know, that's just kind of like its own thing. But for me, it was about like saying, well, you know, I mean, people's faith is so important to who they are and their very essence, their existence. And so I didn't feel like that had to be its own genre. I feel you can marry that with anything. You can marry it with sci-fi, as I previously did. You can marry it with fantasy. It's no film and no genre, you know, can be without, you know, an element of faith in there. So that was always my goal with my past few scripts, and that was certainly my goal with Exemplum, to make this really fascinating faith-based film, but also this really intriguing noir thriller at the same time.
Hmm.
Uh, and the next project I'm working on right now doesn't do that at all. It's 100% just a straightforward film. But that I would say that was my main intention, to marry my Catholic faith and blend it seamlessly with a genre.
Yeah, you bring up a good point with faith, and especially like the Catholic faith, or just any faith really. It doesn't have to be especially in our overly politically charged climate, it doesn't necessarily have to be a statement on, or necessarily have to be in a certain lane, or like the what am I trying to say? The traditional sense of what a conservative Christian film should be, and I wouldn't even necessarily classify Exemplum as a Christian film. I mean, I'd say it's a straight laced noir thriller with tackling the Catholic Church and with Catholic themes. But you see that with studios like Angel Studios, and they just released a film last
Mhm.
year called The Shift, which was um, which was about marrying the story of the Book of Job in a science fiction setting. Albeit the film was a little over the head, and for my particular taste in that regard, but
Mhm.
it's essentially sought out to do kind of the same thing, um, which in its essence is stretch what a Christian film, whatever that even is, can be. And again, not to say that your
Yeah.
film is a Christian film, but like the elements of Christianity or Catholicism doesn't necessarily classify the film as one thing or another. And that these elements don't have to be used in the traditional sense that they have been used for the past, 10, 15 years in film.
Yeah, I mean, I think people can. I mean, let's think about like truly great faith-based filmmaking here. I mean, they're in like the easily top 30s of just great movies. I mean, It's a Wonderful Life, but it is a faith-based film.
Mm,
It's about a
yes.
man who's wrestling with his existence and prays out to God in the end and sends an angel. Like that is a faith-based film. Period. The Seventh Seal. It may not be the most uplifting movie, but it is a faith-based film. At the end of the day, it's about a
Hmm.
man contemplating the existence of God and and his own mortality and all the various different ideas that come with that. There is no reason why a movie that's dealing with faith has to in any way, shape, or form be esoteric or be or niche or not just all around great film. So we have plenty of examples in cinema um, set before us. There's no reason why Christian filmmakers need to feel like they're in a subculture of some kind.
Right, right, yeah, and I hope and pray that that's the era that we're entering in. I think we've had conversations in private about how I think from what I see, I think the film industry, especially on the conservative side, is evolving to hopefully a new era that is going to fill the void that Hollywood seems so insistent on not filling, which we'll get to in just a
Yeah,
moment. But I did want to talk
yeah.
about your creative process as a filmmaker. What inspires you? Um, what inspirations have inspired this particular idea, and where do you think you get your style from?
It's a very good question. I mean, it's multifaceted. I mean, this movie was very heavily influenced. I mean, it's quite clear. Heavily influenced by Darren Aronofsky's Pi, Nolan's Following, Double Indemnity for sure, beyond a shadow of a
Hmm.
doubt. I mean, it's pretty. The opening is a guy who's shot driving in a car. It's like, and it ends with a guy who's shot. It's pretty it's pretty blatant how
Hmm.
open it is about how it borrows from Double Indemnity. Uh, Fritz Lang is certainly a huge influence on my filmmaking, particularly his film N. This movie that's very evident by the fact that you feel something about a certain character and then you flips it on its head and it makes you have to question if what you were feeling about a character was 100% accurate. Um, that's all taken from Fritz Lang and kind of the intricate plot about two different kind of factions and forces working against each other. Um, and though that's not evident in this film, um, James Cameron is also a big influence on me. primarily in his spectacle, and I think his ability, certainly in the pre-Avatar eras, to always just make his films just an event, just emotionally impactful.
Mm-hmm.
Characters who really are engaged in what they're dealing with and taking it to the fullest extent. Loved Cameron's ability to do that. So those are all certainly my biggest influences. But it's amazing how things can happen to you. For instance, the next movie that I'm working on right now, I won't reveal the details of the plot, but it's all inspired by John Hughes' 80s teen flicks.
Okay.
And I was drawn to that because of something in my own childhood that we're exploring in the film. But it's sometimes inspirations can come from places you least expect it, and your passion can be drawn towards a project by things that you didn't quite necessarily realize or know
Mm-hmm.
or understand.
Yeah. That's really cool. I look forward to seeing that. I'm also a huge 80s fan, and particularly of John Hughes. So that's
Absolutely.
you've already got my my ticket for the next one. But yeah, definitely the early Christopher Nolan inspiration. I see that there, and yeah, I think James Cameron has a great way of. I like what you said. He makes his movies feel like an event, like you do have to see it, or what you're seeing, whether you know what you're going into or not, is in some way special. There is something special behind this, and I definitely got that vibe while watching the film. I just was like, this is kind of crazy that like this is not being discovered by anybody else, or this is kind of like a grassroots movement. This film, because like there is just some crazy twists and turns throughout the story that I'm just like,
Yeah.
am
Well,
I
part
really
of it
the
is
only?
because I have no marketing budget.
Yeah.
That's mainly. I'm like literally everything is off of the goodwill of people who talk about this film and share this film. That's why
Mm-hmm.
I tell your audiences, anybody who's listening to this, if you watch the film, please get out there and tell people about it. Get out there and post
Yes.
about it.
Yes,
Just
absolutely.
that you people are really the ones who make it happen.
Mm-hmm. So you chose to do kind of double triple duty on this. You wrote the film, but you also chose to direct it and play the lead role in the film, which I can speak from experience is not an easy feat.
No.
um, what was the idea behind? First off, do you have experience acting? Is acting something that you're interested in, or was that just out of mere necessity?
Mere necessity. I will not do that again. No.
Okay.
It was very difficult. Extremely difficult. I am
Mm,
never doing that again. I am so just torn by that experience. I don't even know if I could do a 1 minute cameo in my own movie. To be brutally
mm,
honest with you, like I just want to stay as far away from acting and directing again. Uh, so it was budgetary. I knew we were going to be shooting 7 weekends in a row. Colin is in every scene of the movie. I knew I could do it. I knew I could do it because I have had some acting experience. And as a screenwriter, it does hone your abilities as an actor because when you are writing your script, you do have to be able to work around this dialogue. And the way that you work around dialogue and you arrive at a good line is being able to, get inside the character's head and what's the inflection? What are we at? That's all very important. So that does hone your ability as a actor.
mm,
Of course, my base, my beginning was acting. I started in drama when I was like in 7th grade, and I did it all throughout high school. I did 2 years of drama before I even started film, my film class. So it's something I had an experience in.
mm,
It's not my passion by any means. People have asked me, "Do you want to do more acting?" I would do it if somebody offered me a role that that I felt was right, but it is not my passion. I believe acting it's a real job. It's real work, very very hard work
mm,
that requires your fullest commitment. And the only thing that can drive you through that is passion. I'm just not passionate enough about what acting is. But it was for this film. It was all budgetary, and I knew I could do it. And so, yeah, that was that.
Hmm. Well, you could have fooled me because I thought you pulled in a great performance and really gave the film a lot of
Well, thank you.
weight. And yeah, no, it was a really good performance. And
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I hope someone does offer you a role that you think would be suited for you, because I do think you do have some level of talent in front of the camera. Did acting as because I've done that on multiple occasions, one out of necessity, two because I do enjoy it. But do you think that how does that relationship, like being the director but then also being the main star, how do you think that affects your relationship with your then cast and crew?
Well, it was interesting. Certainly, what was most difficult about it is that, especially something this low budget. I mean, when you see me on camera, literally 10 seconds before I yelled action, I'm worried about like how, what am I going to get people for food tomorrow? How are we going to get to this location that we need? How am I going to get this prop? How are we going to set this thing up? And I'm calling action, and I have to be Colin. That's very hard to do. And it's also like I'm wearing two different hats at the same time, and I have to tell my DP, Vlad, we have to move the camera here, and then I'll have to check just do a check of like, okay, what do we shoot? That slows things down. And I might there might be like a little bit of tension between me and the crew and having to do that. I would say it actually made my relationship with the actors actually very solid, very strong, because I'm rehearsing the scene with them. And so we're actually kind of building a rapport in that regard. So it was actually very easy to direct them and very easy to I think, get them comfortable with my direction because I was there in the scene with them. So I actually think it made the actors actually a lot easier. But I do think that there was a disconnect between me and the crew some of the time because of the fact that I'm having to go into director mode and action mode. And when I come out of action mode, it's sort of like, oh, where have we arrived now? What? That's not what I thought. It was hard. It was very hard in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could definitely attest to it definitely builds your rapport with the actors, because you're not only the one that's telling them what to do, but you're in the trenches with them essentially. And so at least that's the experience that I've had with the actors that I've had to direct in those situations.
I would recommend to anybody who's a director, to take an acting class, a good one, for a period of time, to really understand what it's like as an actor. Because I mean, when I say it is very hard. It's hard work. It's real work. It's not easy.
Yeah.
I know it looks easy to people to go into those emotions and be vulnerable like that in front of people, but it's not easy. The hardest scene of this for me to shoot was the final confrontation scene. I'm having Louis yell at me, and Joe's a very good actor, and he's very in the moment, and he's pointing a gun at me. It's like, and I'm popping in and out of that. It was very taxing. I was like, at the end of the day, I was very glad that day was over because I did not want to be in that state anymore.
Yeah. No, people don't anticipate, like, you are like changing your emotional state, even if it is just pretend. Well, you have to be a pretty damn good pretender. Like, that's what acting is. And you're absolutely right. It's not an easy job. And if anyone chooses to act and direct, you got to have the passion, and you got to have the talent, or just, I guess in your case, out of necessity, you just got to, grit your teeth and get through it.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about beyond Exemplum, beyond this film. What are your favorite films, and what types of filmmakers? I think you mentioned Christopher Nolan, and oh gosh, there was another filmmaker that you referenced. I'm forgetting the name.
Lang.
Yes, yeah. What other filmmakers and films are your favorites or have inspired you in your pursuits as a filmmaker?
Well, my three top favorites have always been M from Fritz Lang, The Seventh Seal from Ingmar Bergman, and Terminator 2 from James Cameron. Those are my top three
Great one.
influences. And then if I I could go down the list and down the line from there. It just becomes nebulous. But those are definitely my top three influences when I come to them. Yeah.
Nice. And why those three particularly?
It's very interesting. I've always been kind of drawn to that question. I just I think when it comes to Fritz Lang, I admire, especially, if you look at M, it's a film done in 1930 about the first serial killer in all of cinema, and I'm very fascinated by the plot that he constructed out of that movie. It's about a serial killer on the streets of Berlin, and because the cops are cracking down so hard on the city, the criminal underworld can't do business, and so the criminal underworld launches their own unit to try and find the killer, and it becomes this cat and mouse game between the police and the criminal underworld to find this killer. And that plot to me, especially this guy in 1930s coming up with this very intricate plot with these moral quagmires that he gets into, I just was so fascinated by that. That's probably what has drawn me to Fritz Lang so much. And I do admire the fact that he, in that movie, he goes to that place. He dares the audience to be like, "Oh, you think you understand? Like, oh, you feel this way because you feel hate, right? You feel hate towards Peter Lorre's killer, but is that hate legitimate? Like, are you not? Is that hate not a reflection of you? Are you not the bad guy?" That to me, I love his willingness to answer those questions. And Ingmar Bergman, I don't know. I'm fairly certain. I don't know for sure if Ingmar Bergman was an atheist or if he was just a glorified agnostic. But I do appreciate the way Ingmar Bergman asked the question of faith in all of his works. His ability to just be like, I don't see God around here. I know there's got to be something good. He's not dismissive towards people of faith. He treats the players in the Seventh Seal with respect. They're clearly representations of believers, so he doesn't dismiss the faithful, but he's just like, but also the world is a dark place. How do we figure all that out? I appreciate his honesty with that, as opposed to people that kind of want to just bury their heads in the sand and act like everything's all beautiful and hunky dory. And I just love, his visuals, the medieval aspect. I've always been a kind of a medievalist, so that's what kind of draws me to him in that regard. And I already talked about James Cameron. I think Terminator 2 is a masterpiece of blockbuster cinema. There's a couple of flaws in the movie I won't point out, but I think towards the third act. But but I think it's a masterpiece in blockbuster cinema for sure.
Yeah. Luckily, we're in the same boat there. I adore James Cameron's work, and I definitely adore. I would say Terminator 2 has to be my favorite of his as well.
Yeah.
Curious, what are your thoughts on his commitment to Avatar?
Well, I did write an article about what I don't like about the Avatar movies. It's not all political. I'm not trying to, I'm trying to see things from his perspective. I just think the problem is with Avatar is I don't think the Na'vi are very well thought out, in my honest opinion. I just think they're a little too simplistic. That's been a lot of people's gripe with the film. I don't care if he wants to, rag on the military-industrial complex and all. That's all well and good. Or if he wants to have environmental themes, that's something I can at least respect. If he does it well. It's just I think the Na'vi are just too simplistic, and I can't connect with them. He wants me to, but I just can't do it. And there's a few reasons for that. I think it's just they just don't have much emotion beyond them well, they love the Earth and they're sad to see that they love their planet and they're sad to see it destroyed. That's just kind of it with them. I don't really think that makes them very complicated. And two, I just think that the biggest problem that I've had with Avatar is that I just don't like the CGI. I don't think that it looks good.
Wow.
I don't think it looks amazing. Everybody says the visual. It's like I've watched both of them. I watched Avatar 2. Yeah, it looks fake to me. I think that there's something fundamental about practical effects versus CGI. Something about weight, dimension, just dealing with those materials that just make for a better image at the end of the day. And you
Hmm.
just will never be able to fully replicate that with a computer. And his whole point with the Avatar was basically to create computer generated images that are so photorealistic that you can't tell the difference. And it just doesn't, somewhere along the line, I just am like, no, I don't connect to it. And the 3D doesn't work for me either.
Hmm.
Honestly, I felt the 3D made the film seem smaller to me. I think 2D is a perfectly appropriate, way to see a film. I appreciate Christopher Nolan's willingness to push IMAX technology as
Hmm.
opposed to 3D technology, but the 3D doesn't work for me. So I just no, it's really unfortunate. I haven't liked any of the Avatar movies. So
Hmm.
sorry, James. Love you, love everything you did, but I can't get behind them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they are, to give them the benefit of the doubt, they are just perfectly fine science fiction fantasy films, and that's what I tend to enjoy mostly out of them. But yeah, I would agree that I think, especially nowadays, the CGI shtick is just getting overplayed. And yes, James Cameron had a huge hand in making that what it is today. But
Yeah,
I think it's just kind of like, all right, cool, you can make CGI people in water. That's
yeah. Well, his
okay.
apotheosis was, I mean, the Titanic was the golden age. I mean, it was the practical and the CGI married together so beautifully and so seamlessly. And instead, it was now it's all sound stages, and
Hmm.
it's not
Yeah.
like, you know. Believe me, I understand the impulse of this. I really do. I
Hmm.
mean, filmmaking is really hard stuff. Going out on location, getting, I mean, all the elements that got to come together, the things that go against you. I mean, it's really hard.
Hmm.
Okay, I
Yeah.
understand the impulse of just like build a big giant sound studio, go inside and sit, park my car, go, and get the film, and we'll just handle it in post. I
Probably
get it,
less stressful too.
believe me, I get it. But it's just, but at the end of the day, there is something about the that painstaking process that creates a film that you can just feel it in the I don't know, something metaphysical
Yeah.
about it, but
Yeah.
just there's it's a real thing.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. I'm a huge proponent of practical effects. Most of my favorite movies are practical effects heavier. If there are special effects, um, they're used very minimally, and used to very good effect. I mean, I think one of the best recent examples is Godzilla minus one, which is a phenomenal
Yeah,
Godzilla movie. Blows the park out of anything Hollywood's been doing right now. But most of the film takes place in these small little quiet vignettes of post-war 1944 Japan. And when you see Godzilla, he's either half submerged in water, slowly swimming towards these ships to blow them up, or you're seeing these epic destruction scenes of Godzilla in Japan destroying things, and it's like him in its full glory. So it's like, okay, obviously they put all of their visual effects budget into this one moment of Godzilla coming up on shore. Um, but then you have like the Marvel movies where it's like 90% CGI, and you're just like, that looks horrible.
yeah,
As much as I love James Cameron, I can say I passively enjoyed the films, but I don't see them as like these, you know, visually wise, sure, cinematic achievements, great stories. Nah, no, not really.
yeah,
I did have another question. I just remembered I wanted to ask you about Exemplum specifically. I thought I was very fascinated by the use of social media and influencers and the main character's obsession with the influencer life, even though he has committed himself to uh, the duties and the life of a priest. I'm curious how much of how much of the dialogue in the film about social media and influencers, how much of that is actually you and your actual opinions on that stuff.
yeah. Well, I mean, I would say that it's a lot of my actual opinions on it. I do believe that we're living in a day and age. I think the right 100%. Christians online, Catholics online, conservatives especially, are 100% guilty of this. We're just living in this age of just, I would say, utilizing people's faults and sins in order to get influence, in order to get followings. We live in kind of this outrage culture, or monetized outrage, so to speak, and kind of living for popularity instead of living for something true. And in Colin's case, he's taking people's sins and he's utilizing them to gain power and influence. So take that what you will.
Yeah, no, I thought it was the way you guys crafted the. I could definitely see the medieval influence in there too. It was just the way you guys crafted that stuff, and obviously looked. I'm assuming it was handmade. Those little vignettes or those intros.
Yes,
beautifully
yes.
made, beautifully well done.
Oh, thank you.
I couldn't I couldn't help but think this was like a dark side. Like if Father Mike Schmidt's Bible in a Year went dark.
Yeah, well, and I don't want to get people to, I don't want people to think that I'm ragging on Catholics in media. One of my beloved saints is Fulton Sheen. He was actually my confirmation saint, and I think Bishop Barron does a lot of really good work, and so does Father Mike Schmidt, and everything like that. But it's more about he is Colin is a priest. His job is for the salvation of people, but he's more concerned about worldly affairs and more concerned about gaining influence and power.
Yeah.
And most especially about, it's more of like he's a stand-in for what should be grace, but there is no grace, and that's what social media is. Social media is a graceless place. It's a place to where you get influence and you get followers by raging into the void or talking about how awful other people are, instead of sharing something good. To give you an example of this, I've created a film. I've crafted something. I've got wonderful press out there, and I can share it out there, and it might get a few tweets, whatever. If I want to go online and I want to say F you to F this and that and the government and all this, that will get plenty of followers. I think that there's kind of insanity in our own society where if I want to rage on Twitter, that's going to get more influence and more attention than putting out a piece of work that created.
Yeah, it is a shame that like Twitter especially is kind of this as great as it has been with like Elon Musk buying and all that. It is still just an echo chamber for negativity, and I think it would take a real maelstrom of a movement to move that in a more positive direction, or just divorce yourself from social media altogether.
Well, I do see a lot of good signs. There's a good community of artists, who I work with and follow on Twitter. People like Cake, others. Michael McGruth is another one. Mark Judge, is a very good, proponent of the arts. People are just kind of like done with the outrage, done and tired of this, and we all just like celebrating each other's work. I mean, if you look at my Twitter feed, all I do is just talk about movies and things that I like.
Yes.
I don't engage in any of this the outrage culture anymore. It's not worth it. And I think Americans would do better if people would stay away from that. I think our culture needs more just talking about the things we like and trying to connect with our neighbors more. We don't need another article about firing, because this is what I grew up, in from 2010 to like 2020, it was all about like, I'm going to go on Facebook or Twitter right now and I'm going to tell all my friends about how awful somebody in the country is, and I'm not like them. I don't care what you are. I don't care if it's the right wing that's doing it or the left wing. That's always been that has been social media. And I just think we need to stop that. Get away from that. I engaged in it too. I did it. It wasn't a good thing. This is why I just like talking about what I like, and I just want to connect with people anymore. There's no need for us to be at odds with our neighbors or fighting them about this stuff anymore. It's not your job. Sorry, people, it's not your job to get a politician elected. It's their job. It's what they raise hundreds of millions of dollars, to do. It's not your job. Stop feeling like it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll admit I'm guilty of that. Even to this day, I'm guilty of that. And it's
all of us are. Every last one of us are. Yeah. All of us are. Yeah.
It's a struggle to break past it because it's just such part of the norm, and we kind of mindlessly, go into that because it does make it feel good to put people down and build ourselves up, no matter how powerful or influential. But I guess again, essentially, it's just echoing into the void, as you said.
Hmm.
To go back to the use of media, and you referenced people like Fulton Sheen, Father Mike Schmidt, Bishop Barron. Um, I think, yeah, you make a good point that those are all obviously positive versions of Catholics, specifically Catholics, engaging with the culture, because we're not called to be part of the culture, but we're called to engage with the culture in some capacity, and to not use media, or just to slander media as just this, like, oh, it's just a liberal thing, or movies or television, that's something liberals do, and it's like, no,
Hmm.
look at Fulton Sheen back in the day. I mean, he had one of the most popular television programs on the planet. That's not nothing. I mean, people back then were clamoring for a message that is good, true, and beautiful. Why aren't we filling that void today with something along those lines? And of course, with the rise of social media and YouTube and streaming and all that stuff, there are more voices to fill that void. Um, but I don't know. I just hear a lot of people in my circles who just don't think that it's worth it to support um, the culture, as Catholics. Oh, we
Well,
don't
it
need to.
should be,
It
and,
should
and
be,
support the
yeah.
support the culture in the real way, because yeah, this is also why I don't engage in utilizing my films as as a tool in like the culture war or anything like that, because culture is not about that. Culture is where you hang your hat. It's leisure. It's just like it's supposed to be entirely useless. I mean, of course, there's beautiful values and morals that I impart in my work, absolutely.
Mhm.
Um, that I want people to feel and understand. And I'm not going to instruct them. I'm not going to explain it to them. Um, and that's all going to be in there. But at the end of the but culture is it's your life. It's what you go out, and it's away from all those troubles. Like that's what makes life worth living. And
Mhm.
to not have your faith is one of the deepest parts of our existence. I tell people often, about like when we die, it is forever. Whether I know movies like Marvel have completely and totally destroyed the very concept of death, because it's like everyone's dying and coming back once a week,
Or there's a
going in there. But it's
multiverse
like,
version of them out there
yeah,
somewhere.
exactly. But it's like dying is final. It is.
Mhm.
And so there's nothing stupid or nonsensical about contemplating where the heck you go after all this is said and done, because that's where you're going forever.
Mhm.
Is there eternal life afterwards or not? So to not even, to have that very weighty concept, one of the most important questions you can ask yourself, and have it not represented in culture, and most especially have it represented in such a sad, infantile way. There's just no excuse for that. We can't allow it to be like this anymore. It's a
Yeah.
real point of view. Christianity is a very real point of view, just as much as anything else, and it should be out there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I guess we're kind of getting into another topic I wanted to bring up, which is the current state of the film industry. Obviously, we've talked about how it's been very politicized, and you've made the case that you're not necessarily interested in the the throwing of stones of the culture war per se. But beyond all that, what are your thoughts on what's happening to our film industry?
Well, the film industry is going through an interesting change, and this is where I think conservative filmmakers and conservative money backers of films should really pay attention. I do think that woke, as we know it, is starting to slowly die a natural death in the entertainment industry.
Oh
I
yeah.
think in all industry in general, because it is not popular. It's very off putting to a great deal of people. It's off putting to liberals. It is. They, even if they're not saying it publicly, they don't like it. They don't like having their art dictated by, you know, some group, or being told what to say or do, or being told what they can't say or do, or just having all their operations upended over something like, it's like, well, pronouns. It's like, well, you know, we got money to make here. We got jobs on the line here. We have a market to reach. I mean, this is nonsensical. This is ridiculous. So I do think woke is starting to die in the entertainment industry, and so we'll see for a time if perhaps that will come around, and Hollywood will get back to business as usual. So I think the right and the conservatives, their main concern should be like, well, not be like, well, we're going to make anti-woke films, or like we're going to stick it to woke Hollywood. Their goal, the conservative position in Hollywood, and the most conservative people, frankly, that you'll ever meet in Hollywood, even if they're not conservative or Republicans, even if they're liberals, are the people who are very dedicated to their craft. The filmmakers who are dedicated to making a very good film, the screenwriters who just want to make really good stuff, or the actors who want to put out good work. That's what conservatives need to tap into. They need to be funding that and pushing that and creating that, finding the artists who really care about their craft and putting them to work in funding them. That's what's going to really set the industry, you know, on fire and sending it, you know, where it needs to be. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think that's kind of a bone that I think a lot of conservative filmmakers, myself included, have to pick with just the general movement. They don't see the value, or they at least apparently don't see the value in investing in the culture in that way. Like if all these conservative millionaires put their money behind culture, getting these big movies made, and not supporting the next candidate who, as you said, is their own job to elect themselves or get themselves elected or get people's vote, you would probably see a different story, maybe even a different opinion. Like, maybe the culture war would swing a different way with the conservative movement. But yeah, I also agree with what you said about wokeness. I think, I don't know, I follow the story around Disney very closely. It's one of the main things I cover on this podcast, and it's like every year I hear a leaker or a scoop that this year they're going to change things, or Bob Iger's got the thing, got the message, or Chapek's got the message. They're going to turn things around, and honestly, I don't know if I think they're just either they are going to turn things around because they'll get that desperate, or they are so stubborn that they're literally going to destroy the most popular and most beloved film studio of all time, just to die on the hill that they've chose to plant their flag on.
Yeah, well, we'll see, but I do think it's catching up to people, because I do think the very key people in the industry are getting really tired of it. Disney is a particular example. It is an interesting example. I don't know what's going on there, but other places are not taking it in. Yeah.
Well, Paul, again, I want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been great having you. We've had a really great discussion. I've really enjoyed it. Is there anything you want to say about Exemplum, or just about the culture in general, before we wrap up?
No, I would just say, just please watch it, give it your time, and tell other people about it. You really, all of you people out there who give it a watch, you really are the people who are going to set this over. So thank you for giving your time, and just let people know.
All right. Well, if people want to reach you online, where can they find you?
They can find me at Proland Films on X, or at Proland Films on Instagram.
All right. We'll make sure to link those in the description of this episode. Paul Rowland, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Vince. You have a beautiful day.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.